Speaking of what they did wrong, Solomon Grundy,
Yes.
do you think now that someone has some buyer's remorse over signing Saraya, the signing of Saraya?
Yes. In a word, yes, because this was, I don't know. It's like I hate to say it, but it's like I've called it the AEW effect, where she came in, huge response, huge reaction, gradually as the weeks go on, dissipating, dying out, people losing interest until you finally get to the match. And I hate to say it because I think Britt Baker's great, and I mean on the mic and in the ring. This was
not Britt Baker's fault.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And I would have to say it was probably the women, which sounds insane. It was probably the women's match that the crowd was least interested in. And that's saying a lot because you had this, what was supposed to be this dramatic story of a comeback. And then they screwed it up by seeming to somehow want to turn Britt Baker face. And you don't know who you're supposed to root for. And the weird thing was at the press scrum, I think Saraya even said that was one of the strong suits of the match, that you didn't know who to root for. She actually said, she addressed it and said that she thought it was great that you had one person who had the inspirational comeback story, and then you had the other person who was the sympathetic AEW original who's defending her turf, and you could decide who you want to root for. And I thought that was one of the weaknesses of the match.
Well, and you never know with the kids these days whether they have been sold that bill of goods by somebody trying to manipulate them or whether they actually think that. And I know somebody's going to say, oh, Saraya's grown up in a wrestling family. Well, apparently she didn't listen like many, kids, delinquent children. She didn't listen to her parents. No, we talked about it. I said, the Britt Baker promo from television would make him want to boo Saraya out of the building when she was supposed to be the Raven babyface and was when she first appeared. But then at the same time, Britt Baker has been such a good heel. They're into her as a heel. So it was like they were trying to give all of the fans a reason not to react to each girl. They didn't want to boo Saraya because they like her, but they didn't want to cheer for her because they're more sympathetic to Britt Baker, but they don't really want to cheer for her all the way because she's supposed to be a heel and we like her that way. So for a lot of this, they just sat there and stared at it. And it didn't help that this, I'm sorry, was not even an average girls match. I had better girls matches on Ohio Valley Wrestling Television in front of 25,000 homes in Louisville, Kentucky with Victoria and Mickey James and Jazz, Jillian Hall, etc. than was exhibited here. And we've seen Britt Baker do better than this when one of the girls isn't landing on her and breaking her face. But again, the idea is Saraya's coming back after 5 years from a neck injury that caused her retirement. Within 2 minutes, Britt Baker gives her a neck breaker off the apron onto the floor. And then they continue to have a match. And she's working the neck, yes, but if this was the UFC, and let's say everybody, Conor McGregor, he injured his knee in training. Well, then, yes, his opponent might very well want to go after that injured knee, but I don't think they would go another 20 minutes after the opponent took a goddamn baseball bat to the knee. Is there any sense of context to what you could? It's a 120-pound girl that hadn't wrestled in 5 years because of neck fusion surgery or whatever. I think if you just gave her a neck breaker in the ring and let her take a nice bump off of it and she sold it, that's good enough for the first 2 minutes. And by the sloppy go-home stretch, I think Saraya was either ready to give up or she was blown up because the expression on her face was like, oh, fuck, these people aren't caring.
She definitely seemed blown up. You could tell even by the end of it, it was one of those things where you look in her face and you could tell she's thinking, wow, this is not as easy as I remember it being. You could really tell that it took a toll on her. And I was actually getting a little concerned because I think like WWE, we've seen this before with other talents where I think their medical staff is very conservative. They really err on the side of caution. They try not to put people in there that they think have a chance of, getting very seriously hurt.
Right.
And then it seems like after years of this, right? After years of this, all of a sudden she shows up in AEW and it's like, yeah, you're fine. Just get in there. It's okay. 100% clear.
It's just a flesh wound.
And I have to look at that very skeptically,
Oh, and then they got on the top rope and kind of awkwardly fiddled around, and Saraya tried to hit a sunset flip power bomb, but Britt kind of landed on her legs. They more or less crumpled. Saraya hit a DDT, looked like it killed Britt Baker. And then it wouldn't end. They kept doing false finishes back and forth, and finally Saraya hits another one of those. It's like a package DDT, and then another one, and just beat her Baker flat. I mean, again, why does everybody have to hit a finish and then pick the fucking body up and hit another finish or two? Then you've beaten somebody flat. They've got no bitch, no gripe, no out. When you hit a finish, boom, and cover 1, 2, 3, and the guy or girl kicks out a little bit too late, then you've got something. But you've just beat these people flat as a plate full of piss. And that's what happened here. And was there did you detect a major response to Saraya winning her? The major response was Saraya. She was overcome with emotion. Yes. Everybody else was overcome with need for a bathroom break.
I think she genuinely was. I mean, it had to be. We all know how much this means to her. I mean, they made a movie out of it, for God's sake. So, you could tell that it meant a lot to her. I thought it was a nice touch that her brother was there, and he was kind of, for people that know the backstory, if anyone does, which is another concern. But it added to the match. But again, like you said, it just felt like she was the most invested in the match out of anyone in the building.
And I mean, again, I don't know whether it's the way that this thing has been booked and put together, where they bring a girl that's so popular into the company and then immediately put her with their most popular heel girl, and then phrase or construct the interviews to where you're rooting for the heel as the home team. Did they didn't have a reaction because they didn't want to have the reaction they were being told to have, so they just didn't have any? Or was it that the match didn't come together? Because it didn't, and I'm sure she was rusty, but whatever the fuck. I don't remember Paige's matches before. I don't know how good she was or wasn't.
I think being away definitely hurt, not just in her own abilities, but in people's response to her. I mean, she deserves a lot of credit in WWE, I think, because she was, if you go back to when they started really putting emphasis on women's wrestling, that was actually good. She was one of the first ones that led the charge, sort of, and I think they had a lot of hopes for her before she got hurt. But I think what happened was, after she was out, she got completely overshadowed, I think, by a lot of the wrestlers that came after her that were a lot better, quite frankly, in WWE, that really became cemented in people's minds as the faces of the women's revolution, like the Charlotte Flairs and Sasha Banks and Bayley and people like that. And it's sort of like, what have you done for me lately kind of a thing.